He was definitely pretty hot. I'm not a hater. I hate him, but he was good looking. Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to another Makeup and History. I have decided to bring my theme song back to the beginning of the video because so many of you guys have asked me to, and I don't know why I took it away to begin with. Like, if you don't like my singing, don't watch me. Alright? I'd love if you stayed, but you don't have to. If you're new here, Makeup and History is a series on my channel where I put on makeup while talking about a historical event, a scandal from the past, or just a person that I find fascinating. In my last upload, I talked about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. That video got a lot of mixed reviews. I don't know Meghan very well, but people really hate her. For today's video, we're going to be talking about another polarizing figure in history, American history, and that is President Ronald Reagan. I personally hate his guts, but there are a lot of people who really like him a lot. And today we're going to be breaking down who he was and what he did. And just so we're clear, I am not a Republican or a Democrat really for that matter. I personally think the entire political system in the US needs to be reformed. Like, we should have more than two major parties. So I don't want anyone thinking that I'm going to just be talking about Ronald Reagan in a bad light because he was a Republican. No, I'm going to be talking about him in a bad light because he was a bad person. If you haven't already and you would like to, please subscribe and join me. I try to post whenever I can, you know? Turn on the notification bell so that you're notified every time I do decide to upload so you don't miss out. And yes, let's put on some makeup and get into this story. All of the products and everything that I'm using will be listed down in the description box below if you're curious. And if you are familiar with the story, or if I get any of the information in this video incorrect, please feel free to politely correct me down in the comments below. Ronald Reagan, in my opinion, is debatably one of the worst presidents that we've had for many reasons, but notably because a lot of the economic inequality and injustice that we see today can be traced directly back to his presidency and the policies that he enacted. Reagan didn't do this all by himself. He definitely had help with other presidents, but in my opinion, the reason he's the worst is because he's never had to pay for any of the terrible things that he's done. He's still viewed as one of the best presidents we've had by many people. Like, he has a lot of die-hard fans. People really love him. There are so many things to cover when it comes to Ronald Reagan that we're gonna have to do two parts. So this is gonna be part one. We're gonna talk about his economic policies, Reaganomics, which is literally makes my blood boil just talking about it. And in part two, we're going to talk about some of the very shady things that he did overseas. Part two will probably get demonetized, but that's okay. When I was doing research for this video, I just couldn't help but just feel so enraged. So to start the story, we have to get in our time machine and travel back in time as we do. So put your seatbelt on. Should I do my other brow before we get in the time machine? I'm gonna do my other brow before we get in the time machine. Hold on. All right, so the other eyebrow's on. Now let's get in the time machine. Put your seatbelt on. We made it, guys. We made it. We're in 1911. Ronald Reagan was born February 6th, 1911 in Tampico, Illinois. His father, Jack Reagan, was a salesman, and his mother, Nell Reagan, was a stay-at-home mother. She was also very active in the church. He also had an older brother named Neil Reagan. Reagan's mother had a very strong Christian faith, and she encouraged her kids to be the same. Growing up, Reagan had a pretty good childhood. His family moved around Illinois a bit, but they stayed within the state. He graduated high school in 1928 and then went to Eureka College, also in Illinois, to study sociology and economics. Reagan wasn't a great student. He graduated with a C average, but his peers described him as a jack of all trades. He was good at a lot of different things. He played sports, he did theater, he was in student government. He was also very popular amongst his peers because he was pretty good looking. He was pretty attractive. I'm not a hater. I hate him, but he was good looking. I'm gonna rank Reagan like top 3 best looking presidents we've ever had for sure. For sure. He was definitely pretty hot. Reagan graduated from university in 1932, which also happened to be at the height of the Great Depression, so he had a really hard time finding a job. He eventually got a job working as a radio announcer.
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ronald Reagan. A few months ago, I was a sports announcer on a radio station in Des Moines, Iowa.
And shortly after that, he met this Hollywood agent at a party, and the agent told him that he should be an actor. So he auditioned for Warner Brothers Studios, and he actually got booked for some gigs. Reagan began working as an actor, and he had a pretty extensive acting career. He was never booked for anything notable. It was a lot of second-rate TV films and shows, but you know, he had an acting career nonetheless. He he did a lot. In 1938, Reagan was working on set for a movie called Brother Rat, and he meets his first wife, Jane Wyman. They fall in love and they get married in 1940. The two end up having 2 children total. Well, they had 3 children, but one of them died really, really young, so they had 2 children grow to be adults. Sorry, hope that makes sense. Around the same time that Reagan married his first wife, the United States was also entering into World War II, and Reagan was an avid FDR fan. He was a big fan of FDR, and he really wanted to get involved with the war. So he tried to enlist, but he couldn't because he had bad eyesight. So instead, he began making propaganda films for the US military. His contributions to the war efforts reignited his love for politics, and he decided to start joining political groups within Hollywood. At this time, he was known amongst his friends as a liberal left-wing Democrat, which is really funny. It's only funny because we know he didn't end up that way, but that's how he was known. A liberal left-wing Democrat. Shortly after joining some of the groups in Hollywood, Reagan realized that they were actually communist groups, and he was not down with communism at all. He was liberal, very liberal, but not communist. So he ended up leaving some of these groups. He did, however, stay in the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, which, if you're not familiar with, is a labor union for actors and actresses. It still exists today. And this is where he meets his second wife, Nancy Davis. In 1948, Jane, Reagan's first wife, filed for divorce because she says that she didn't like how involved he was in the Screen Actors Guild. She felt like his role was taking up too much time. She didn't like it, she wanted out, so she files for divorce. Then, 1 year later, in 1949, an actress named Nancy Davis reaches out to Reagan because he's now the president of the Screen Actors Guild. She reaches out to him because apparently another actress with her name was an open communist, and she was getting blacklisted because people kept confusing her with the other actress. So she went to him to see if he could help unswitch the names. Reagan, who was freshly divorced at this point, he was looking good, meets Nancy and tries to help her, and Nancy says that their first meeting wasn't exactly love at first sight, but it was pretty close. That's a direct quote from her. It's pretty close. The two of them begin dating and fall head over heels in love with one another, and then in 1952, they get married. Now, one thing everyone can agree on when it comes to Ronald Reagan is that he loved Nancy Reagan, and she adored him just as much. They spent a lot of time together and even acted in movies together. They were inseparable. It was obvious to anyone who spent time with them that they were truly in love. They were very affectionate with one another, and this continued throughout their entire marriage.
For all the years we've been married, it's been we, not you and I. It would be inconceivable to me to go my own way on something without her. And I think it would be the same for her.
Before they got married, Reagan was known to his peers as a liberal left-wing Democrat, like we said earlier. He was literally leading unions in the Screen Actors Guild. He cared a lot about unity and helping people. After they got married was when we start to see his political views change. He became more conservative, more Republican-esque. Now, Nancy came from a very wealthy conservative family. Her father was an active Republican who believed very strongly in American traditions and values. He was a very wealthy man who was against government handouts, government involvement, all that stuff. He was very, very conservative Republican. And so was Nancy. She really admired her family's values, and eventually so did Reagan. Reagan really cared a lot about what Nancy thought, so it's assumed that, you know, you want to be accepted by her family, maybe you accept some of their views. Maybe he believed those views all along, who knows? But it's kind of a direct correlation between when he got with Nancy. So thanks a lot, Nancy. Thank you for that. Those who were close to him or who worked closely with him also said that Nancy was really difficult. Like, she didn't get along well with really anyone but Reagan, it seemed like.
Well, we would come to realize that Nancy Reagan was the most powerful person behind the president. People around her were afraid of her, and she was kind of the presence over everything.
She didn't get along with his ex-wife. She didn't get along with any of his kids. Even the kids that they had together, they would like publicly fight. She was a very difficult person. She also really liked astrology. Fun fact, she used an astrologer to make all of their decisions. When the public found out about it, she denied it, but she really liked astrology.
No, that's bad luck.
I have learned not to argue with her superstitions.
Nancy Reagan was an astrologist. All right, so moving on, Reagan decides that he's going to run for governor in 1966, and he decides to run as a Republican. His campaign is built on the promises that he's going to send the welfare bums back to work and clean up the mess at Berkeley. In the 1960s, Berkeley University was notoriously known for starting a lot of the riots against the Vietnam War. It was a very liberal university, it still is a very liberal university, and they were doing a lot of riots and protests, which encouraged other campuses across the United States to do the same. But Berkeley was kind of like the catalyst, I think. I don't know, I wasn't there. Many people just wanted the damn hippies to shut up and stop complaining, and Reagan promised to do that, as well as sending the welfare bums back to work. So in 1967, he won. He was elected governor of California. This year, California was also a red state. It was like completely red, which I thought was very interesting. Almost immediately after being elected governor in 1968, Reagan tried to undercut Nixon's presidential campaign. He didn't really like Nixon, even though he was like a devout Republican. He did not like Nixon, and he wanted to try his hand at being president, but that didn't work. So he waited it out and tried again, and this time in 1980, he won, and he became the 40th president of the United States. He was also the oldest president to be elected at that time. He was 69. I think he's been beat out now by Joe Biden, who is 84, 81. How old is Joe Biden? 81? He's a lot older. He's older. But at the time, 69 was the oldest president we'd ever elected. And he chose George H.W. Bush Sr. as his vice president, which I didn't know that. I didn't know that George Bush was a vice president. You learn something new every day. Reagan's campaign slogan was, "Let's make America great again."
Let us pledge to each other that we can, and so help us God, we will make America great again. Thank you very much.
That was his campaign slogan. And his promise to the American people was that he was going to reduce government involvement.
The leadership that I envision would be to take the lead in getting government off the backs of the people of the United States and turning you loose to do what you can do so well. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
People really liked him a lot. He was known as the great communicator because he was able to communicate with the masses, the general public, as well as world leaders. He made many people feel heard and understood. The great communicator. That was Reagan. And he did do some good things. Like, his presidency wasn't all terrible. It was just mostly terrible, in my opinion. One of the greatest things Reagan is known for is helping to end the Cold War against the Soviet Union. He was able to use his masterful communication skills to end the Cold War and defeat communism, which everyone was thrilled about. They were terrified of communism. They were terrified of a nuclear war. They were having bomb drills and building shelters. Like, people were terrified. So the fact that this had ended now and they could credit Reagan for doing that made him a hero. Like, he was a national hero. He also survived an assassination attempt really early in his presidency, which I'm sure contributed to the hero complex, right? Like, if someone tries to shoot you and you live, everyone's like, yes, that guy's bulletproof. That's good, I guess. Other than that, he sucks. He fucking sucks, and we're gonna talk about why. I'm gonna let you guys form your own opinions as to why he was the worst president, I think. But, you know, you decide for yourself. You think for yourself while you still can. So firstly, the reason Ronald Reagan was a terrible president was that he was a liar. He lied all of the time. He publicly admitted that being an actor helped him with being the president because as the president, you had to act a lot, which is just another word for saying lie. He lied a lot. And he's not the only president to have ever lied. I'm sure they've all lied. But he would get caught in lies and continue telling the same lie. After it was proven to be a lie, he still would say it. One of the most outrageous lies Reagan ever told was that trees cause more pollution than automobiles. That's what he said. He said that trees cause more pollution than cars. Trees cause more pollution than cars. He said it more than once. So he would tell a story about a Chicago welfare queen who was allegedly having 8 different aliases and collecting multiple checks from the government.
She has 50 social security numbers and 50 addresses in Chicago alone.
So of course this was investigated, and all they could find was one woman who had 2 aliases and collected $8,000 total in welfare checks, which is, you know, she was still breaking the law, but not nearly as much as Reagan made it seem. Once this was proven to be false, he continued telling the story about a Chicago welfare queen.
Washington doesn't even know how many people are on welfare, how many cheaters are getting more than one check.
If the story of the